Gaming is in a weird spot right now. Every other game is either a remake, a sequel, or some live service grind fest. But you know what? Some of the best gaming experiences already happened, and they're just sitting there, waiting for you to revisit them. So today, we're diving into 20 games you absolutely need to play again in 2025. Whether it's for the story, the gameplay, or just because modern games haven't quite topped them. Let's get started. Far Cry 3 wasn't just another shooter, it was a survival experience. You play as Jason Brody, a privileged tourist who gets stranded on a lawless tropical island. What starts as a desperate escape turns into a power fantasy as Jason evolves from a scared rich kid into a ruthless warrior. The world itself feels alive. Lush jungles filled with enemies, wildlife that can either help or kill you, and dynamic encounters that make every moment feel unpredictable. And then there's Vaas Montenegro, hands down one of the best villains in gaming. His insanity, unpredictability, and sheer presence elevate every scene he's in. Unfortunately, the game's story loses steam after he exits, and Jason himself isn't the most compelling protagonist. But in terms of gameplay, the mix of stealth, gunplay, and open-world chaos still holds up better than any modern Far Cry title. Metro Exodus took the franchise out of the tunnels and into the open world, without sacrificing what made Metro special. This isn't your typical FPS where you can run and gun. Every bullet counts, and managing your resources is just as important as taking down enemies. The environments are beautifully bleak, from frozen wastelands to sun-scorched deserts. Each area tells a story, packed with environmental storytelling that rewards exploration. The game's biggest strength is its immersion. You feel every reload, every gasp for air in a radiation-filled zone, every flickering light in a monster-infested ruin. Some players might find the pacing slow, but that's the point. It's a world that demands patience and careful planning. If you love deep, atmospheric storytelling, Metro Exodus is a must-revisit. Max Payne 3 is a game about loss, regret, and an aging action hero drowning in alcohol and bad decisions. This is a much grittier, more realistic Max compared to the previous games. Gone are the comic book panels, replaced with documentary-style cinematics that make every moment feel raw. But let's talk about the gunplay. The bullet time mechanics still feel incredible, and every shootout is a chaotic ballet of destruction. The weapons feel powerful, the animations are ridiculously detailed, and the environments get torn apart as the bullets fly. Some might find the game's linear nature and frequent cutscenes intrusive, but as a cinematic shooter, Max Payne 3 is still in a league of its own. Imagine if GTA had better hand-to-hand combat, a tighter narrative, and a setting you don't usually see in video games. That's Sleeping Dogs. You play as Wei Shen, an undercover cop infiltrating the Hong Kong triads, and the game does a fantastic job of making you feel torn between both worlds. The hand-to-hand combat is the real star here, fluid, brutal, and incredibly satisfying. You can use the environment to your advantage, smashing enemies into fish tanks, throwing them off ledges, or slamming car doors on them. While the driving mechanics feel a bit floaty, and the gunplay isn't its strongest suit, the gripping story, fantastic voice acting, and unique setting make this one of the most underrated open-world games ever. Somehow, this open-world wasteland adventure got overlooked, but if you love car combat, brutal melee fights, and a world that feels alive, then you owe it to yourself to play it again. The storm physics are next level, with sandstorms so intense they make you panic while driving at full speed. The vehicular combat is criminally underrated, with deep customization, harpoon-based takedowns, and a sheer sense of impact that makes every chase feel exhilarating. The narrative is minimalist but powerful, embodying the lone warrior theme that defines the Mad Max universe. When Days Gone launched, it had a rough start. Bugs, performance issues, and a bloated open world held it back. But after years of updates, this has become one of the best zombie survival experiences out there. The hordes? Terrifying. Unlike most zombie games where enemies trickle in, Days Gone throws hundreds of infected at you at once, forcing you to think on your feet. The open world feels alive, with dynamic weather, a day-night cycle that affects enemy behavior, and a surprisingly emotional story. The pacing can be slow, but once it clicks, it's one of the most rewarding open-world experiences in recent memory. FPS campaigns don't get much better than Titanfall 2. The movement system is perfect, allowing you to wall run, slide, and chain parkour moves effortlessly. Then there's the level design. Each mission introduces a new mechanic, never overstaying its welcome. And we can't forget Effect and Cause, one of the most brilliant levels in gaming history. The only real downside? The multiplayer, while phenomenal, has been neglected due to server issues. But the campaign alone makes Titanfall 2 a must-play. Before Insomniac made Spider-Man, they gave us Sunset Overdrive, a game that feels like a mix of Tony Hawk, Jet Set Radio, and a punk rock fever dream. You're zipping around a neon-colored city, grinding on rails, bouncing off rooftops, and blasting enemies with some of the most ridiculous weapons ever designed. The humor is over the top, and while it doesn't always land, the sheer fun factor makes up for it. If you skip this one, now's the perfect time to revisit it. At first, Spec Ops: The Line seems like just another military shooter. But then the game starts messing with you. The choices you make aren't really choices. The horrors you witness are your fault. It's a game that deconstructs the shooter genre and leaves you questioning everything by the end. The gameplay itself is standard third-person cover shooting, but the storytelling is what makes this game unforgettable. If you haven't played it before, or even if you have, Spec Ops is worth another visit. Arkham City took everything great about Arkham Asylum and expanded it into an open-world Gotham. The combat, still unmatched. The stealth, tense and rewarding. The story, packed with iconic villains and fantastic twists. The only downside? The Riddler trophies. There are way too many of them. But aside from that, this is still the best Batman experience. That's 10 down, but we're only halfway there. We've still got 10 more must-play games coming up, and some of them might just be even better than these. Stick around, because you won't want to miss what's next. Alright, if you haven't swung through New York as Spider-Man yet, what are you even doing? Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered is hands down one of the most satisfying open-world games out there. The city feels alive, the web-slinging is smooth as butter, and the combat is a blast. What's amazing here is how it blends the superhero fantasy with a grounded story. Peter Parker's balancing act between being a hero and trying to keep his personal life intact hits all the right emotional beats. Yeah, the side missions can get a little repetitive, but when you're soaring through the city, fighting bad guys, and taking in the sights, every moment feels epic. If you've played it before, it's definitely worth jumping back in with the remaster. Now, Alan Wake isn't your typical horror game. This one leans heavy on psychological thrills, mixing a gripping narrative with the eerie vibes of a Stephen King novel. The remaster brings it into 2025 with updated visuals that really make the dark woods and creepy towns feel even more unsettling. You play as Alan Wake, a writer searching for his missing wife in a town where the supernatural lurks around every corner. The flashlight mechanic is such a neat touch, adding tension to every encounter. Sure, the combat can feel a bit dated at times, but the story, with its twists and mystery, still holds up. If you're into atmospheric horror with a solid narrative, this one's a perfect revisit. Prototype 2 is just pure chaos, and I'm here for it. If you love games where you can unleash absolute destruction and feel like an unstoppable force of nature, this is your playground. You play as James Heller, a guy out for revenge with powers that let you literally consume enemies and take their abilities. The gameplay is fast, fluid, and all about creating havoc, but the world around you can feel a bit empty. The story's not winning any awards, but who cares when you're tearing through the city with powers that make you feel like the most dangerous thing on the planet? Sometimes, you just want to feel overpowered, and Prototype 2 does that better than most games. If you ever wanted to be a superpowered rebel, Infamous Second Son gives you that chance. You play as Delsin Rowe, a young guy who discovers he's got powers and is caught in a war between good and evil. What I love about this game is that it really makes you choose your path. Do you become the hero or lean into the darkness? The movement in this game is incredible. You're zipping around Seattle, using your powers to fly and fight with style. The story is solid, though it can get a bit predictable. But if you want a game where you get to feel like a superhero and change the world around you, Second Son is definitely worth revisiting. Let's talk about the golden age of Assassin's Creed. And no, it's not the newer games. It's AC2 and Brotherhood. If you haven't played these yet, you're missing out. You step into the shoes of Ezio Auditore, and trust me, he's one of the most memorable characters in gaming. The cities you explore, the storylines, and the epic twists, it's what made Assassin's Creed a cultural phenomenon. Now yeah, the side content can feel like filler, perhaps, and some of the parkour mechanics are a little janky by today's standards, but the core gameplay and storytelling are top tier. These games define the series and are an absolute must-play. When I first heard about Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought, another Marvel game. But man, was I wrong. This game surprised the hell out of me. You're leading the Guardians, and while it's filled with humor and chaotic action, it also dives deep into the emotional journeys of the characters. The gameplay is a mix of action, puzzle solving, and using each Guardian's unique abilities. The story hits hard, and the character development is top-notch. It's not all perfect. The combat can get repetitive, but the fun and heart you'll experience here more than makes up for it. If you're into great stories with a side of laughs and explosions, this one's a hidden gem. Devil May Cry 5 is all about stylish action. If you like fast-paced combat, over-the-top moves, and enemies that look like they belong in an action movie, this is your game. You get to play as Dante, Nero, and V, each with their own powers and unique combat styles that keep things fresh. The visuals are stunning, and the music will have you hyped every time you enter a battle. The story's a bit campy, but it's fun. Just pure action from start to finish. The only downside? Some of the level design doesn't quite match the high-energy battles, but if you're into flashy combos and killer moves, Devil May Cry 5 is a blast to revisit. Ghost of Tsushima puts you in the shoes of Jin Sakai, a samurai caught between his duty to his people and the brutal tactics he must adopt to fight off the Mongol invasion. The world? Gorgeous. The combat? Fluid and satisfying. It's the perfect game if you've ever dreamed of living the samurai life. The open world is packed with side quests, all of which are worth your time. The emotional weight of the story is carried by Jin's internal struggle, and while the pacing can be a little slow, every moment feels earned. If you've been itching for a game that lets you feel like a true samurai in a living, breathing world, Ghost of Tsushima is definitely one to revisit. The Witcher 3 is often considered the greatest RPG of all time, and I'll admit it's hard to argue against that. You're Geralt of Rivia, a monster hunter trying to track down his adopted daughter in a massive world filled with political intrigue, dark magic, and moral choices that actually matter. The story is gripping, the world is massive, and the combat, while it can feel a bit clunky at times, is still engaging. The side quests are more like short stories, and the relationships Geralt forms along the way are some of the best in RPGs. Sure, it can be overwhelming, but if you want an RPG that really pulls you in, The Witcher 3 is the bar everyone's trying to reach. Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the best open-world games ever made, but don't forget about its predecessor, Red Dead Redemption. Both games offer a deep dive into the American frontier, filled with memorable characters, stunning landscapes, and intense, emotional storytelling. RDR2 is a masterpiece in terms of visuals, attention to detail, and the sheer scope of the world. The pacing can be slow, but that's what makes the world feel so alive. RDR1, though a bit older, still holds up with its incredible story of John Marston's search for redemption. Both games are essential revisits if you haven't already lost yourself in the Wild West. Alright, that's the list. 20 games you definitely need to go back to in 2025. But hey, I'm sure I missed a few. If you've got any games you think should have made the cut, hit me up in the comments. I'm curious to see what you all think. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Now, time to dive back into your backlog. Trust me, there's always something worth playing.